First, I would like to thank the organizers for thinking of me for this role of presenting Olympia tonight. This evening is really an honor. So let me tell you some things about Olympia. Very few about, biography, because she's super-sized. I know that she will feel uncomfortable, and then I will go for her career. So Olympia was born in Barcelona. Her father was French, and her mother Greek. So you can already guess how many languages she can speak. But I can guarantee as well that, her listening skills are even more impressive. So she did her undergraduate studies at the University of Barcelona. Many of you here are from there. After that, she moved to the UK, first obtaining her master in econometrics and mathematical economics, and then the PhD from the London School of Economics. During that period, she already was as well a research fellow at the Nuffield College in Oxford, a couple of years afterwards as well, and then back to London to the Center for Economic Performance at the LSE. In 1991, she started to work at the Banco de España. So this, in practice, was like more than 30 years of career at our institution. She started working as a staff economist, then moved as head of the unit of the microeconomic information and analysis, after that as head of the division of microeconomic analysis, and finally as director of the Department of Structural Analysis and Microeconomic Studies. So with this, you already get a sense of how the hierarchy of the bank is, then you will she will explain more things about that. So indeed, this movement, this advance in the bank's hierarchy went hand in hand with managing an ever-growing team. So at the beginning, and indeed I think that when I started, it was more or less already that size. The unit was like 5 people, 5, 6, something like this. At the end, the department have more than 40, maybe 50, I don't know exactly the numbers. So you can imagine how the things change in terms of managing these people. And indeed, managing people is not only a skill. Olympia really care about all of us as well. Now she's a senior research associate at XVII, and is a fellow of the European Economic Association, a fellow of the Spanish Economic Association, and an international research associate at the Institute for Fiscal Studies in London. In terms of research, I want to emphasize 3 main areas of contribution. First, panel data methods. Second, empirical micro. And third, survey methods. On panel data, she has a super influential paper on panel system estimators that now is kind of a standard tool in the analysis of dynamic responses of heterogeneous agents. Indeed, this paper, this joint work with Manuel Arellano, another look at the instrumental variable estimation of error components models, has been cited more than 15,000 times. But also I want to emphasize her early work on no-homothetic life cycle labor supply preference, because it was really ahead of its time. Then, for many years, he has been working a lot on a wide variety of topics on micro, empirical micro, and making the most of the opportunities offered by the existing micro data set at each point in time, because not always we have been the same kind of data that we have now, to learn about the Spanish economy. This includes household consumption, migration, house prices, unemployment spells, unemployment spells without the muestra, okay? So, wage inequality, firms' cash holdings. But in addition to all of this, I want to emphasize surveys. Because, he has really been a leader in the development of household wealth surveys, not only in Spain, but also at the level of the European Union, and also, for being a reference for countries all over the globe. So I think that the creation of the Survey of Household Finance, the FEF, for us in Spain, in Spanish, has been really a turning point in our understanding of all the household distributions of wealth and the financial condition of Spanish households. But this is like the big ones. Then we have others at the Bank of Spain that I can also share with you that, that she was also leading, such as the Survey of Financial Competencies and the Survey of Financial Competencies for Small Enterprises. But, apart from being an innovator in data production, I want to also emphasize how much she has been contributing to the dissemination of microdata. All these surveys have been public always for research purposes, and we also know how difficult sometimes is getting access to the data. So, this contribution disseminating microdata to the scientific community has been always in the spirit of the Banco de España Data Lab, the B-Lab, and she has been part of this founding team. And then, even let me mention that also today she will tell us about this project with data from employees of the Bank of Spain. This is something that is very difficult to get as well in the institutions, not only getting access to the data, but also convince them that it's useful to do this analysis and to disseminate the results, not just take them as internal analysis. So I think that having her make all these things easier. So for me, it's like a complete success story at the Bank of Spain, but also outside in professional terms, no doubt. But it's not only that. I mean, she's also, highly respected in our profession, but as a lifelong partner, a loving mother of 2, a proud grandmother of 5, all these things, mothers. So the full package is a reference for many of us. So I want to finish with this aspect of Olympia as a role model. So, a role model for us is like we are super impressed about she's in the rank of the top 5% of the world ranking of authors in REPEC, one of the only 30 most cited women in the world in economics. And I guess due to all of this, she has been already being recipient of several awards. The Goodness Prize for the best article in the Journal of Population Economics back to 2001, 2003, the Kendrick Prize for the best article published in the Review of Income and Wealth, the Premio Rey Jaime I de Economía in 2023, the Premio Women Value in Economics this year, and today she's getting as well the recognition of the Jornadas de Economía Laboral. So please join me in congratulating Olympia. And now I leave you with her.
Well, thank you so much. I am truly honored by all this, and it means a great deal to me. I look forward to contributing to the association in any way I can in the years to come. And I am especially grateful to Emilio Congregado and Begoña Cueto for their trust and for the effort they have put into organizing this event. Thank you. And well, many thanks to Laura for her warm introduction and overwhelming. Good thing you said I was shy and you were going to be short, but well, we have worked together with Laura at the Banco de España side by side for many years, and I am really happy to be here today to talk about the work I have done with her and Ana Lamo. But before I begin today, I would like to take a moment to remember Ghazala Asmat, who passed away earlier this month. Ghazala made important and original contributions to academic research, including her influential work on gender inequality in the labor market. At just 46 years old, she had so much more to offer, both intellectually and personally. She was not only a brilliant scholar, but also a very warm and generous person. She will be deeply missed. Thank you. Okay, so as I said, I would like to present the results of a research project with Laura and Lamo on gender and career progression of central bank employees. In that work, we use the universe of personal records from the Banco de España. This is highly confidential data to which we were fortunate to have access in an anonymized form for our study, and we thank the previous governor of the bank for that. The bank made these resources available because they were interested in understanding any gender differences in the earnings and careers of their employees. And it happened at a time the bank implemented a gender equality plan with work-life balance measures aimed at the bank being more attractive to women at all levels. Of course, we are not evaluating this equality plan, and our main goal is to examine if gender-based discrimination was present in promotion decisions at the Bank of Spain. What's the motivation for that? Well, the motivation is double. First, the motivation is women in economics. Our research is related to a recent literature on gender in the economics profession. And Banco de España is a large employer of professional economists at the Spanish and at the EU level. And the study of women in economics is more than an exercise of introspection. There is evidence that gender diversity is a source of intellectual diversity, which improves the scope and the quality of economic research. Women economists tend to study different topics and approach them with methods and perspectives different to men. For example, they disproportionately concentrate in fields like labor economics, health, education, development, public economics. In contrast, female representation is substantially lower in macro, finance, and mathematical methods. Also, women tend to adopt more interdisciplinary methods and are more likely to collaborate across fields. But not only that, diversity also matters for policy design. In a male-dominated field, policies may be biased toward male experiences or male priorities. The second motivation is that is the importance of firm environments and the heterogeneity of firm environments. It is well established that firms are heterogeneous and that firms matter for wage setting. Firms and sectors also matter for gender gaps in wages and career progression. For example, job flexibility varies across sectors, and in those sectors where there is flexibility, gender gaps are practically inexistent. More generally, there is increased evidence that firms and organizations differ in their selection practices, training, promotion standards, amenities for working mothers, and organizational culture. And there is still a lot that we do not know about which employers' differences are responsible for which gender gaps. Okay, so complete personnel records are ideal for case studies because they provide detailed information on the career progression at different job levels within an organization. And in the corporate sector, career advancement may occur through mobility, changing jobs. At a central bank, like for example the Bank of Spain, internal career advancement is key. Why the Bank of Spain? Well, most research on gender in the economic profession focuses on academic economists. But central banks are also important workplaces for them and also suffer from female scarcity, particularly at managerial positions. Moreover, central bank economists and academic economists face different incentives and environments. So understanding the factors that hold back women at central banks is of great importance and may provide lessons of broader applicability to other organizations. Laura, together with Luke Leven and Anna Lamo, using personnel records from the European Central Bank, had the first paper that studied career progression of women in a central bank. In contrast to their study, an important novelty of the Banco de España personnel files is that they contain promotions to the higher managerial positions, which are division heads and department directors. And I just tell you that our most interesting results will relate to those promotions. These are positions of leadership and power within the Bank of Spain, immediately below the very top management. So the only people that we don't have in our data are the 5 or 6 director generals, the deputy governor, and the governor. Okay, everything, we know everything else. Another very interesting feature of the Banco de España is that it has a mixed system of promotions through competitive calls. Okay, people apply, you have get an exam or an interview, but also through direct appointments and promotion. They just designate it and they promote. I will explain more on this later. Also, well, at the bank, there may be a stark difference in job flexibility and hence in gender gaps between managerial and non-managerial positions. For example, the cost of children may be very different when moving from a non-managerial to a managerial position, even within the same organization. The BDE, Bank of Spain, is on the surface a good employer. This is shown by revealed preferences. Employees tend to stay at the Bank of Spain for a long time after joining. So we can look at life cycle career gender gaps in an organization with little turnover. Also, women sometimes withdraw from the labor market to balance work and home responsibilities, potentially because workplaces, at least some of them, are poorly designed for women's needs. The Bank of Spain offers high job security to its permanent employees, along with the legal possibility for mothers with young children to switch from full-time to part-time work. So we find interesting to study how women's careers progress relative to men's in a presumably protective environment like this one. So for the rest of the talk, I will show you the share of women at the Bank of Spain. I will explain the promotion procedures, the data. I will show you the gender gaps in wages, and mainly the main results are the gender gaps in promotions. And then we'll discuss a bit the results and conclude. Please, if you have any comments or questions or anything is not clear now that I will explain promotion procedures and so on, just interrupt. So, share of women over time. The proportion of women has increased over time from a bit over 30% in 1987 to around 53% in 2023. And you can see that both in the as a share of total employees and also as share of new entrants to the bank. Okay? The shares have really increased for all of them. This increase has been seen in all the hierarchical levels, in all the categories at the bank, but not in an equal way. For example, here you can see the structure, the hierarchy of the bank. okay? And the numbers you see are the percentage of people in that category as a percentage of total employees at the bank, okay? The total number of employees at the bank is around 3,500. So at the bottom, you have the administrative and support services, sorry. Then experts and technicians, senior experts. The first management role is unit heads. And then you get division heads and department directors, okay? Well, the share of women is quite unequal. At the bottom, administrative and support services, you have 59% of them are women. In senior experts, experts and technicians is 50%. When you get to unit heads and division heads, it's 43%. Department directors is 34%. Okay? So the bank employs quite equally men and women, but quite different proportion according to the level in the hierarchy. What are the three mechanisms that the bank uses to promote people? Well, the first one, the one the bank calls vertical promotion, is a pay rise, okay? It's an advancement in the salary scale that is granted annually to some employees without change in their position. They have the same duties, and this can be granted to both managers and non-managers, but it's just a pay rise, okay? And it's, okay. Then the second is direct appointment. And this is mainly used for appointments to managerial position. I mean, the person is just designated to be a manager. The third way is competitive calls. A selection process opens. This process can be for a managerial position or a non-managerial. And this kind of the competitive call involves an examination and or an interview. There is a selection committee, and you have to apply for the vacancy. Okay. And sometimes these competitive calls are open to outsiders, not always. So in brief, professional progression at the bank consists of either going up the ladder of the hierarchy or within the same hierarchical level getting a permanent salary increase, okay? And the way you can go up the ladder in the hierarchy is either by direct appointment, you're just designated, or as a result of a competitive call, okay? Which requires the candidate to go through a selection procedure for which they have to apply. It's important that you understand these three ways of being promoted. The data. We built a panel data set that combines anonymized personal files with information on recruitment and selection processes. I mean, we merge the information of selection processes with the worker history at month level, okay? And well, as I said before, we observe promotions to the higher managerial positions since it's only the very top management above department directors that are excluded, 8 people approximately. And this data allow us to examine gender differences in career trajectories over time, including transitions between managerial and non-managerial positions. Well, in theory, the data go back to 1959, but there were no computerized records, then there were changes in the hierarchical structure. So the comparable time series can be constructed since 1987, which is what I showed you about the shares of women among the personnel. But in practice, we have a data set that consists of almost 900,000 monthly observations for almost 6,000 employees. from 1987 to 2023. However, annual salaries, for example, were only available since 2000, contractual hours since 2009, and selection processes since 2013. So most of our multivariate analysis refers to the 11 years from 2013 to 2023. Well, which is good also because it's not prehistory, okay, everything we conclude here. So, gaps in wages. Here you can see gender gap in wages, in raw wages, okay? So you can see that, well, on average, the top figure on your left, on average, women's annual wages are 19% lower than men. And hourly wages, on average, women's ones are 16% lower, okay? If you look at hours of work are the same between ages 26 to 32, more or less. Then they diverge for 10 years, and then the gap closes a bit. If you look at the last figure on the bottom, you can see it's in percentage terms how hours, okay, the brown thing, the gap diminishes or after these 2 years of the gap opening. However, the gaps in annual wages and hourly wages persist, okay? But as I said, this is raw wage gaps. Perhaps part of these gaps are due to differences in the characteristics of men and women. So what we do is, well, through multivariate analysis, we get residualized wage gaps. So for workers without children, the wage gap disappears after adjusting for all the usual demographics, for experience, area, and professional category. Okay, I'm just coming back to that. So professional category means level in the hierarchy. For workers with children, even conditioning on all those things, there is some gap which disappears when you look at hourly wages. Okay, so what that means is that differences in working hours fully account for this gap. However, your level in the hierarchy, your professional status, is the result of career advancement, okay, of the promotions you got. So these wage gaps are not easily interpretable. So what we are going to look at is gaps in promotions, okay? So the aggregate monthly promotion rate for all types of promotions combined, I mean pay rises, direct nomination, competitive calls, is 1.26%, which roughly means that on average, one would expect a promotion every 6 or 7 years. Of course, there is a huge heterogeneity, okay? But, and there is no difference in these aggregate gaps between men and women, both unconditionally and conditional on characteristics. When you look at women with children, the promotion rates are there is a small gap, but it's very small. However, these numbers aggregate all types of promotions, and therefore we do not take into account that men and women may participate in different types of promotion processes, okay? So now what we are going to do is to move the unit of analysis to look at gaps, looking at potential candidates by promotion process. That means we want to compare the chances of male and females potential candidates being promoted within each promotion process, okay? So for that, we have to define what's the pool of potential candidates, okay? So for direct appointments, and pay rises, the pool of potential candidates consists of those who at the time of the selection process worked in the same professional group and business area as the selected employee. Okay, the same hierarchical level and the same area, economics, financial stability, whatever. For competitive calls, okay, of course, the pool contains the actual candidates, okay, the people that have applied. But for competitive calls, we also calculate gender gaps in the probability of applying, okay? And the pool of potential applicants consists of those who at the time of the selection process worked in the same professional group and business area as the majority of actual candidates, okay? Well, in our sample, there are over 3,000 promotion processes, 2,500 are pay rises, almost 400 competitive, and almost 200 direct appointment for managerial positions. Okay? So now I can move on to our three main results. Promotions to higher managerial positions, i.e. division head and department director. For those promotions, there is a negative gender gap in competitive calls, i.e. the ones that require application. Most of them are to division head. There are a few to department director, but for direct appointments or pay rises, there is no effect. There is no gender gap. Okay? And for lower managerial, the first managerial position, unit heads, there is no gap either. Okay? Second, we also looked at the subsample of areas where most economists work. Okay? What I told you before is for the whole bank, but we also look at the areas where most economists work. And we find the same negative gender gaps in competitive calls for promotion to higher managerial position. Okay? Division head, department director. The noteworthy result here in the economist areas is that for vertical promotions, for pay rises, within lower managerial positions, i.e. the unit head, the first managerial position, there is a significant and large positive gap. Positive. Okay. So it's interesting that the negative gap for promotions to higher managerial positions is compounded with a positive gap in vertical promotions that carry salary increases but no advancement in the hierarchy. Okay? So what we think is that this vertical promotion, these pay rises, could be a consolation prize for those women who haven't been promoted to the upper levels of the hierarchy. The third result is that we calculate whether there is a gender gap in the probability of applying. And indeed, there is a gender gap in the probability of applying in competitive calls, of course, the only ones for which there is an application process. And the negative gap occurs significantly both for applications to higher level managerial positions and the first lower level managerial position. Although the gap is larger, the higher the managerial position is. Okay? But in the areas where most economists work, there is no gap in the application probabilities. And that is in contrast with the ECB. So overall, we find that there is a negative gender gap in competitive calls for promotions to higher managerial levels, together with a negative gap in applications. Okay? So if we think for a moment that there is a positive self-selection of women into competitive calls, which is plausible, okay, our negative gap estimate, will be a lower bound in absolute value. Okay? That is, taking self-selection into account, we would find an even more negative gender gap in competitive calls for promotions to higher managerial levels. The reason is that one would expect the women that apply are the ones which are most positively self-selected. Okay? If there is a positive correlation between the unobserved determinants of applying and the unobserved determinants of being promoted, this generates an attenuation bias. Okay? But it's important to think about what all this means. Okay? During our period of analysis, 2013 to 2023, there is a negative gender gap in the allocation of higher power within the Bank of Spain, but only in competitive calls, not in promotions through direct appointment. What does this mean? Okay? Well, there is a literature that says that stereotypes in gender roles affect how women and men are perceived in leadership and managerial contexts. Research in psychology shows that ambitious women are often liked less than ambitious men. A man who is assertive about seeking leadership is viewed positively. A woman doing the same may be seen as self-promoting or overly ambitious, okay, leading to penalties in hiring and promotion decisions. So at the bank, a woman applying for a managerial position, possibly without being encouraged to do so, can be perceived as violating social expectations simply by seeking authority. Okay? Of course, there are implications first for women, okay, the career advancement. Women may be overlooked for promotions or leadership roles despite qualifications, but also for organizational performance. Companies may miss out on diverse leadership perspectives by reinforcing gender stereotypes. So the conclusions I would take from that study is that, well, the data show that the Bank of Spain has come a long way during the period of analysis. Gaps in the shares of employees, in comparable wages, in promotion rates in aggregate have disappeared. It's also remarkable that we have found no gaps in promotions to higher managerial positions by direct appointment. Okay? However, we have found that women have been penalized for applying to leadership positions on their own initiative, even if it's possible that they were compensated with pay rises. This is possible. This is possibly an example of what the psychological literature calls unconscious biases associated to traditional gender norms and expectations. So I would conclude with two positive outcomes of this study. First, well, evidence of the progress made. But second, the power of data analysis to convert unconscious biases into conscious evidence, which, thanks to being detected, can be remedied. Thank you.
Just my own initiative in case there are questions, comments. If not, I will give the floor to Emilio and María Ángeles, just in case. Okay, one question there.
So in the part of the probability of asking for the promotion, do you see if there is any difference if the individual who is just above asking the promotion is a woman or a male? Or
No.
do you have variation there?
No, I mean, it's a committee.
Yeah.
But no, we haven't looked at that. No, I totally agree. I mean, there are many studies that show that sometimes even women are even worse than men when having to judge other women. It's not men that comply to traditional gender norms, it's also women.
Okay, so Emilio, María Ángeles. Oh, okay. Oh. Okay. You want to? Well, it depends.
To be honest, when we presented that at the bank, we presented much more detailed evidence of interest to the bank. You know, here I've tried to extract the main results and the ones that could be of interest for a more general audience, okay? So when we presented at the bank, it was really, really very, very descriptive, very, very detailed. They took it seriously, but I don't know. I'm not there anymore. So the previous governor was really interested. It was thanks to him that we got the data. I think the current governor is also interested in gender equality. So, but I think I will send that again to the deputy governor.
No, in practice, I mean, I think that the lesson from here, in the case of the bank as well, was like they realized how many things we can do with the data to help human resources, you know, for many, many things. So, as Olympia said, in those meetings that we have with them, we were going almost, you know, we call this area instead of general director because the general directorate, because there have been changes, so grouping some of them. And, you know, they were kind of looking at the data area by area and thinking, you know, you should go there and talk to the responsible in each area to see what we can do. And human resources take this for, you know, they have been promoting several leadership programs for women, you know.
The quality plan.
Exactly. So
No, I mean,
I think that they take this seriously. Then I don't know how much this is, you know, getting to the level of employees, but yeah.
it takes time. It takes time. For example, from what Ana Lamo tells us, no, their initial study at the ECB has had consequences because at the ECB there was the promotion is only through competitive calls, okay. So when they saw the results, they have started, doing some direct appointments, encouraging women to apply. So
yeah, because at the
I want to
ECB
think
was
that
really a matter of this gender gap in application. So they were particularly concerned about that because they have targets. So they were not reaching the targets for female shares at the managerial position. So they really need to do something about it. So, but it's not only but the ECB. There are other private banks, even in Spain, that they are changing even. I always put one example, but it's in Spanish, super nice. So it's that they used to call experto y gran experto. Okay, when you open a position, so it's a position for experto y gran, or a position for gran experto. Okay, and this has to be in Spanish because it's super important. The fact that it's no experta or gran experta. So now they change for at least 3 years of experience on this topic, or at least 5 years of experience on this topic, and the share of women applying increase a lot. It's not only, I don't think that is a matter of wording. I think it's also a matter of saying what you mean with experto and gran experto. Okay, an objective requirement that I know whether I fulfill. but all these kind of small changes matter.
But I really think that making this, taking conscience of this unconscious bias is very important, but not only at the bank. One can see himself or herself in other organizations, how this can happen. You do some introspection and how you see a man that likes power or a woman that likes power, no? So. Well, there is a bias. In what sense? I mean, in all organizations, you have to be selected somehow. There are. Well, there is a selection bias, and I mean, I spoke about it, but. Taking into account that selection, this bias would be even larger. Oh, I really think so. I really think so.
From our experience after this paper, you know, the Bank of Italy, they has been doing, I mean, most of the big institutions can be doing this, no? Because they have the data and they have enough people and they have, you know, promotion process and all of that. So there are commonalities, but there are differences. The competitive calls in our case and the one of the ECB, I mean, the one of the ECB's particular is only economies, is only for the very first rank and all of that, but they were common in some aspect. The Bank of Italy is very similar as well. Where I was more surprised, it was like how similar as well the results are relative to these private banks, because these are, you know, different kind of businesses, I guess. So one they do for profit and they do for other public services. So, but in this aspect, they were very similar. All of this is for professional economists, so I'm not going to claim this could be the case. Although here we don't only have economists, okay? So because, as Olympia was saying, there is these subsamples where workers are, you know, the areas that we can imagine more economists work, but we also have, you know, human resources, legal department, and there are differences, okay? So there are areas that are, there are a lot of females there and they have issues with having males presenting, but so in that aspect, I don't know how comparable is.
We were very fortunate to be given the personnel data for the top management. In some places you don't get them. They say that because of confidentiality you don't get them. And it's where the difference occurs. It's where there is, I mean, but you can see that everywhere in all organizations is at the top management that there is scarcity of women. No? So if you don't have the data, we would have found no gender gaps in anything. No, from untenure to tenure, you go through in most cases, there is one exception, but you go through a competitive process.
We have that in the data, but we have very few. I mean, we have very few of these.
But they are there. No.
The job market in our data set is like, I don't know, I would say 5% of the reservation.
And then, but then, I mean, they are in the expert category. They are no. It takes many years to go from the expert category to unit head, and then to the others. So
they will be part of that, but they are
they will be part of that, and in that part where the job market people enter, I mean, there is no, we don't find gender gap in pay rises, okay? No, well, what we observe is that they are less likely than a comparable man to get that position. Okay, and the way we interpret that, given that for the same position, if it's direct appointment, we don't see a gender gap. Okay, so the way we interpret is that when women on their own will apply for a leadership position, they are somehow penalized, okay? And, well, there is a lot of psychological literature on these unconscious biases of...
That's pretty contradictory to me. It's like we are trying to push women into top positions, but these women that decide to do it, it's like, I don't know. I think it's social norms. I don't know. How can we change that?
Being conscious, but taking conscience that this happens. That not because a woman is applying for power, you don't have to look at her differently than when a man applies for power. The traditional gender norms is not women seeking power, it's doing other things.
No, indeed. I mean, for me, these results are at the,
For direct appointments, even a top position, there is no gender bias.
and the fact that, you provide them, as long as they stay as unit level, as unit head, it's more likely that they get the direct salary increases, That is also a sign of, I find this super, worrisome in that aspect, no? Because they are doing well their job, so it's not that they are not capable. You are even, recognizing her more, but at that level. You can stay there. You are doing fine.
No, we haven't checked that.
But
No.
the dynamics of the process, not in the case of the master's, in the case of the ECD, that we were checking because all of them were open calls, so they were, it was easier to see people reapplying several times, and I can, they were like, reapplying.
At the bank.
But not only in your area, also make applying all over the place. Because I guess in some cases it makes more sense to not get being selected. To make only applying in the areas where they are. So a failure there probably makes you feel that worse than if you are not selected in an area where you have experience. So I don't know, this was just a speaking, so I didn't go far away, but at least there were less chances of applying after a failure.
evening. We are going to combine Spanish and English because I want to be precise with my words, okay? And after my intervention, Professor Davia from University of Castilla-La Mancha will continue with the event. Bueno, sabéis que esta es la primera edición del premio Asociación Española de Economía del Trabajo en Economía Laboral. Es un premio que hemos decidido instaurar para reconocer trayectorias absolutamente ejemplares en el ámbito de la economía laboral, trayectorias académicas e investigadoras de primer nivel. Deciros que hemos tenido el honor de que la profesora Olympia Bover haya aceptado nuestra invitación a formar parte del claustro que hoy se inicia o que hoy da continuidad de socios de honor de esta asociación. Para nosotros el honor evidentemente es nuestro. Esperamos que hoy se abra pues una larga lista de académicos que tienen que estar pues al nivel de la persona que homenajeamos hoy. Yo creo que esto nos supone un respaldo, nos supone una guía, y yo creo que digamos, para la asociación es un honor, y creo que nos lleva a estar en el camino correcto, y recibir el respaldo de personas como Olympia Bover es para nosotros un tremendo honor. El premio que va a entregar a continuación la profesora Davia es un premio en el que algunos compañeros de la asociación se han dejado la piel, porque esto no ha sido un proceso fácil. Hemos intentado que sea algo que simbolice muchas cosas. Concepción Román y Mónica Carmona se han tomado muchas molestias en esto, y creo que el resultado final ha quedado muy bien. Y quiero ser tan preciso en las palabras porque, digamos, el escultor que ha dado forma al premio que vamos a entregar, bueno, pues ha hecho una representación que yo creo que merece la pena que la profesora Davia os enseñe. Se me ha olvidado poner el fondo. Creo, esto es Vetusta, no es nuestro. Lo veo en la barra para la izquierda. La barra para la izquierda. Dificultades técnicas. No sé dónde está la izquierda. Sí, la izquierda sí sé dónde está, lo que no es
la otra izquierda.
¿Lo ves tú?
Esta.
Ahí, bueno.
Madre mía.
¿Ya lo ponemos?
Vale.
Bueno, pues le doy la palabra.
Nada, sí. Solamente es que cuando he visto el texto que tenéis delante, pues me ha parecido que es un texto muy, muy bonito y que merece la pena ser leído, y no solamente ser leído en pantalla para darle más pues solemnidad al acto, ¿no? Y además, pues no sé quién lo ha redactado, pero creo que es realmente bello. So I will read through the text that you've got in the screen, first in Spanish, because I think if we read it in English, it's going to be a bit complicated. So first I will go to read it in Spanish, because I think that the words need to be, like they need some time. So, tal y como ha explicado nuestro compañero y presidente Emilio, la Asociación Española de Economía del Trabajo concede el premio AET en Economía Laboral con el fin de reconocer destacadas trayectorias investigadoras en el campo de la economía laboral. Este galardón, otorgado por un comité especializado, supone un reconocimiento a personas que han contribuido significativamente al avance del conocimiento en este área. El premio se entrega durante el acto de celebración de la AET Distinguished Lecture durante las jornadas de economía laboral, un honor que quiere reconocer la influencia científica de las aportaciones de la persona premiada. Además, el galardonado o la galardonada se convierte en socio de honor de la AET, uniendo su nombre a los académicos que dan lugar a esta asociación científica. Como símbolo de este reconocimiento, el premiado recibe una representación escultórica de una criatura mitológica creada por el artista Víctor Pulido, el grifo. Como símbolo de este reconocimiento, entonces vamos a entregar el grifo, que es una figura que combina la majestuosidad del águila en su mitad superior y la fuerza del león en la inferior. Se interpreta alegóricamente como el guardián del saber y del conocimiento. En la mitología, el grifo encarna la vigilancia y la protección, cualidades esenciales para preservar y promover el conocimiento. Al igual que el grifo, los premiados comparten la cualidad de haber contribuido de forma sobresaliente a salvaguardar y desarrollar el valioso corpus del conocimiento económico acerca del mercado de trabajo y sus dinámicas, asegurando que este saber continúe siendo un recurso inestimable para futuras generaciones. Y ahora lo leemos en inglés para que lo escuchemos todos. Lo siento, se va a hacer un poco largo. So the Spanish Association of Labor Economics awards the AEET Prize in Labor Economics to recognize the most outstanding research careers in the field of labor economics. This accolade, granted by a specialized committee, acknowledges individuals who have significantly contributed to the advancement of knowledge in this area. The prize is presented during the celebration of AEET Distinguished Lecture at Labor Economics Meeting, a tribute that highlights the scientific influence of the recipient's contributions. Additionally, the awardee is granted honorary fellowship in the AEET, joining their name with their academicians who founded this scientific association. As a symbol of recognition, the recipient is presented with a sculptural representation of a mythological creature created by artist Víctor Pulido, the grifo. The figure that combines the majesty of an eagle in its upper half with the strength of a lion in its lower half is allegorically interpreted as the guardian of knowledge and wisdom. In mythology, the griffin embodies vigilance and protection, essential qualities for preserving and promoting knowledge. Like the griffin, the awardee shares the quality of having outstanding contributed to safeguard and developing the valuable body of economic knowledge regarding the labor market and its dynamics, ensuring that this wisdom remains an invaluable resource for future generations. Pues vamos allá, vamos a descubrirlo.